Hey, anti and alternative media people, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet and on over 140 radio stations across the U.S. and around the world on satellite radio, including back in Africa after Liberty Radio Network did some fundraising and got their satellite radio back in Africa. So hello back, Africa. I have a great guest coming on, a media guy who's been really successful lately for sure with AntiMedia, theantimedia.org. He's got a huge site. I see it all the time. Their Facebook has nearly, I think, it's got tons of likes. I don't know if it's 1 million or something. It's a lot. And interesting guy, and there's lots to talk about, especially about how the state and essentially just the state is really just trying to shut us alternative media outlets down. There's a lot of stuff going on with that. I've already talked a little bit about it in the past, but we're going to talk a lot more about it because Nick Bernabe, who's on with me of the antimedia.org, knows a lot about that and has seen a lot of it. And so we're going to talk about how we are being shut down in many different ways, and maybe we can come up with some solutions on how we can get around these things. So we'll get into all of that. But before we get into that, Nick, I have to check your street cred. How did you become an anarchist?
Oh, that's an interesting question. How did I become an anarchist? I guess I come from my past life has been an entrepreneur, and I've been experienced the police state. I've experienced the drug war, and it really came to a head for me, I think, back in 2012 after seeing the state of affairs when it comes to the elections and how the media really is in control of the elections here in the U.S. anyway. And that kind of led me down a path to questioning the state of affairs when it comes to who tells us what to do and how we allow the government to run our lives in many ways. And that led me to thinking more and more anti-establishment, and eventually I realized, in the end game, the most ideal form of government is a government of one, and it's where one individual decides for himself what he or she or whatever that individual wants to do, and no one else should have the coercion over top of you to make you do things that you don't want to do. But at the same time, no one should have the coercion to tell other people what to do. And so it was just kind of a logical process to me. It was looking at how we have this centralized government, and it's a bureaucracy, and only a handful of people actually vote, and those handful of people elect another handful of people, and they end up telling everybody what to do. So to me, I started developing a philosophy that really looked at it as consent, and I look at the government we're existing in right now. For the most part, all around the world, almost everybody is faced with a government that isn't based on consent. And if you're not consenting, then that government really has no legitimacy. So, I mean, I'm an anarchist, but I'm also open to other ideas. I mean, if people want to live other ways and all that stuff, if they consent to it, I think that's fine. If you consent to democracy, if you consent to a republic, I think that's okay, but at the same time, the entire process should be voluntary, and you should be able to choose what you want to do. It shouldn't be where you're born into a social contract and you're stuck with a social security number, and then that is basically held hostage and can keep your credit down, or it can conscript you into the military, or the government can sell off they can leverage your social security number and expect you to pay it back to whoever later on. All of that stuff to me it doesn't line up with my moral philosophies anymore. A long time ago, before I ever started thinking about this stuff, I really never gave it much thought. So I never really cared for it, and I never really voted or was active in the political scene. But it was seeing the blatantly corrupt media and 2012 and how all that stuff went down with the Warhawks and re-electing Obama and the whole Mitt Romney thing and the whole Ron Paul thing, where he was the only guy that actually had fairly decent ideas, and he was completely shut out of the debates. It set me down this path, and that's where the anti-media came from as well.
That's great. Of course, I was like a really early alternative media or new media, they called us back then in 1994 when I started Canada's largest financial website, stockhouse.com. And man, it's been really interesting to see it all develop over now more than 20 years. To me, it really hadn't really picked up until after 2000. It seemed like people were starting to use the internet, but they weren't really using it like they are today. And it's been since things like YouTube and Facebook, and then all the other technologies that have all been developed since then. The bandwidth has increased quite a bit. You can now stream HD video easily from most places in the world, except for the U.S. The U.S. is pretty bad. Well, it's a third world country, so. But just seeing all the changes is exciting, and it's so exciting to see you doing something that is similar to what I was doing 20 years ago, and just seeing how quickly it's grown. Tell us a little bit about how you founded the AntiMedia, and a little bit about what the AntiMedia is, and tell us about how how it's been going.
Oh yeah, man. Well, it's an interesting story. I had several other Facebook pages in the past, and none of them really took off. And then I had this idea, like I was saying, after the 2012 elections, I was like, you know what, something's got to be done about the media, because otherwise we're just going to continue to be having these brainwashed masses that are going to be supporting people like George Bush or Barack Obama or Marco Rubio or Hillary Clinton. Doesn't matter which one you pick; they're all basically the same. But you know, the media has got such a control on people that they actually make people think, oh, each one of these candidates is actually different. Hillary Clinton is actually different than Jeb Bush, when the reality is they basically have the same policies. They just have a different way of delivering the message while they're running. But when they get into power, they all basically commit the same crimes and stuff like that. But yeah, the AntiMedia, it started off with one meme, and the first meme that we ever posted went kind of viral. And then we had like 1,000 followers within the first 2 days. And then I was like, well, maybe this is the one that's going to actually take off. And we, at first it started out as just me, and then, we started building, and then I brought in Jason Basler from the Free Thought Project. This is before he had the Free Thought Project, and he was one of our first admins, and we were just starting to create content. And it started out as, we were just making memes and sharing articles from other websites and stuff like that. And then, slowly but surely, as we started building a following, we started really contemplating building a website. And after about a year and a half of just doing social media, we put a website together, and we started bringing on writers and stuff. And really what it's built into now is just a collection of journalists that are dedicated to exposing corruption, whether it's in the government, whether it's in corporations, whether it's, anywhere, confronting oppression and injustice wherever it may be. And really what we try to do is give as much editorial freedom to our journalists, and so we don't really change any of their message that they write, and we try to just connect the journalists directly to the people that are looking for the news. And most of the people in our audience are, people that are looking for truth, people that are activists, people that may or may not, agree with what's going on in the world, but they know there's something wrong. So people come to us to get a perspective on what's going on, whether here in the U.S. with the drug war or over in Iraq with ISIS. And it's become a really awesome relationship that we've built up with our fans, where they come to us to really break down a lot of this propaganda and a lot of this media manipulation and a lot of the lies. And that's what we do now. And we've got a team of between 10 and 15 people, depending on the month, that work with us and write with us and help us on social media and help us create great memes and content. And we've been really excited because the last several months, it seems like we've really hit our stride, and it's really starting to pick up really fast. Now, of course, that does have its drawbacks. When it grows so quickly, you have the growing pains and stuff, and we've been going through that all month. And it can be frustrating, but we're really hopeful for the future, and moving forward is just continuing this movement on and continuing to decentralize the media, continuing to attack the controlled media, and while at the same time empowering people, not just within our own organization, but empowering people to become journalists everywhere. Now, like you were saying, with the new technology and all these new things that are available to us, like live streaming, people can live stream right from their phones. So this has unlocked a whole new aspect to journalism, where people can be anywhere on the ground, and they can just turn their phone on or send out a tweet or take a little video or live stream, and it's completely changing the game. And so we're really happy to be a part of that movement, and we think that it's going to sooner or later be the main way that information is dispersed, and the corporate media, the controlled media, is going to continue to fall by the wayside as this new revolution pushes forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We're already seeing that. I believe MSNBC, in their prime demographic, which is, I believe, 24 years old to 55, which is sort of the profitable demographic for them and for most people, they have a total in prime time of 25,000 viewers. You probably get more than that to most of your articles, right?
That's crazy. I mean, and at the same time, they still have this false sense. They're still treated as if they're dictating the news cycle. And it's insane. I think you're right. I think that already a lot of the independent media has become more influential, especially on certain topics. Sometimes we get content that reaches 5 million people, or we get articles that get several 100,000 shares in a day and stuff like that. And I think that the shift is already here, and I think we're witnessing it right now, and it's just going to continue to snowball down until literally, there may be only like 2 big news companies left outside of the independent media.
Yeah, and even they won't be doing very well. CNN, Larry King left. He went to Russia Today, which is the Russian propaganda channel, which is actually pretty good with most of their news except for anything to do with Russia. So you kind of just watch them for most of the news. If you want to know about Russia, then you go to Al Jazeera or somewhere else, and they won't tell you anything bad about the Middle East. It's all sort of propaganda, but my point is that CNN is just dropping off the map. Larry King said that they might as well just show, I only know it in Spanish now, SpongeBob SquarePants cartoons, because they'd get a bigger audience. We've seen people, there's some sort of awareness or awakening going on, and it's sort of affecting everyone. We're seeing, like with Brian Williams' fall from grace, all of a sudden, that story's been around forever, but all of a sudden now it mattered because enough people had heard it, and they started to cry out about it, about him lying about whatever. They all lie all the time anyway, but he's actually the only person who's ever lost his job over anything to do with Iraq, to do with the U.S. government or the media, which is hilarious because the whole war was based on a lie. But my point is that there's a massive shift going on. There's a massive change, and you're on the cusp of it, and that's great. And but at the same time, now they're trying to really try to slow us down. Luke Rudowski, past 2-time Anarchast guest, and who was also here at Acapulco, which we'll be doing again next year in 2016, just about to announce. He really got cut off. His Facebook, it seems like no one can really see anything he posts very often. His YouTube gets really just shut down. Even if he has a viral video go viral, all of a sudden the ads don't work on it. And then there's past Anarchast guest Angela Keaton of antiwar.com, and they had Google ads turn off their Google ads over one photo, which wasn't even that bad of a photo, from Abu Ghraib in Iraq, and that was their main source of income. So this is a major issue. Are you seeing some of this? And if so, how do you feel about it, and what can we do about it?
Oh, definitely. We actually got when everyone got hit with the Abu Ghraib Google ban, we got a warning, fortunately, because Google gives you a certain amount of warnings, and it was our first warning. So we didn't get our ads pulled because of our Abu Ghraib articles, but we did get a pretty harsh warning from Google, basically saying, look, you can't show any kind of violence. They don't even want you showing police brutality videos anymore. And we kind of had a joke going here in the office a couple days ago, where Google's motto used to be "Don't be evil," and now it's "Don't show evil." And so the thing is that it's really what it is. It's even though a lot of it has to do with the way Google provides websites with an ability to make money from their content and pay their people and all that stuff, they use that as a way of censorship. And I think that's what we're starting to see. And they've warned us since the Abu Ghraib articles. We got warned about some other stuff, and it's really gray. Their rules are really gray, and they choose to enforce them upon people in an uneven way. And
I'm sure they don't mind when you show some ISIS videos or something, right? Because that fits what they want people to see. That's their meme.
Yeah, if you show ISIS chopping people's heads off, they don't really mind that. But if
Right.
you show the U.S. government torturing people in Iraq, then they're like, oh, we can't really talk about that stuff. So it really is censorship by economics, and it's really sad that they have to stoop to this level. And I think that the reason why companies like Google and Facebook, tend to do this kind of thing, is just because they know that they have really become part of the establishment. Google has executives that work hand in hand with the Obama administration, and Facebook.
Oh yeah, I heard they're in their office, like at the White House, 3 times a week or something. And I'm going to Bilderberg with Likudowski and also past Anarchast guest Dan Dix. It's going to be in Austria in June 10th or something along those lines. And I think Eric Schmidt goes to that of Google. So yeah, it's total fascism, and that's what fascism is when the corporations work with the government and they try to keep others down, either from not competing with the corporations or from not exposing the government.
Exactly. And these companies, these are the same companies that kind of got outed by Edward Snowden for working too close with the government and helping in the surveillance and the public-private partnerships. I talked to Luke about this when I saw him in Philly at the Free Your Mind conference, and we talked about the need for one is alternative ad networks that are really more friendly to independent writers and people that write about more controversial topics and aren't going to pull your ads down because you write about Abu Ghraib or because you show a video of a cop beating a guy senseless. And also the need, I think, is there as well, considering the censorship, whether it's through Facebook or through Google or through YouTube, is the other need is for independent media networks to work together, share their networks, share their fans with each other, in order to kind of make sure that we can always have a good, strong network, even if something like Facebook does decide to shut you down, or if Google or YouTube decide to shut you down. It's important that we start working now on networks to really make sure that won't be that big of a problem if it does happen. And then the more we do that, the less and less Google will be able to affect us, whether through censorship or through demonetizing. The more that we already have alternatives, the less and less they're going to be able to have the power over us to try to censor us. So I think that's something really important for us in the alternative media to push forward in a broad type of partnership organization to really get this network nice and strong and to really be able to tap into all the different aspects of the movement, because there's so many different groups of people that care about different different things, and there's so many different types of anarchists and libertarians and socialists and greens, and a lot of people can agree on different things. But I think the point is that we need to, no matter what we disagree on, we still need to work together to build this network, because we all know that the censorship is a bad thing, and that the state control over our communications is a bad thing, and we could all kind of work together on that, and then just kind of let people form their own opinions. I think that's what we really need to push forward with to really combat what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. And this show it's mostly for anarcho-capitalists because we focus a lot on building a new world and entrepreneurship and things like that. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there watching. That could be a total opportunity there to work and create some sort of liberty advertising network. And I don't know if Nick's working on one or if anyone else is working on one, but competition's always good. And there is an opportunity there. And I think you'd have a pretty interested market with people like Nick and many others who would at least like to have an alternative if they do get shut down by Google Ads. That's a major source of their revenue. So lots of opportunity there as well. The government always creates opportunity by all their actions at the same time. And I don't think they can really shut us down at this point. You can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to censor us in all these different ways. But the internet is so dynamic, and you can route around so many things that I don't think they'll be able to shut us down unless they shut off the entire internet. And I think at that point, a lot more people wake up and realize what's really going on here, and that only helps our cause as well, even though it could be very difficult in the period while the internet is turned off. But yeah, it's going to be interesting times ahead, and lots of interesting things, and keep your eye on that. And as Nick said, if you're in Liberty sort of circles, get to know everyone else, share things, cross-pollinate with content, do cross-sharing, things like that. It just helps us all build our own networks, and then we can get more intertwined to an extent where if someone has a problem, we can maybe find a way to get around that and get that fixed. So Lots of interesting stuff. And Nick, I know you're into so many different things. I know you wanted to talk about Monsanto. You're quite, that's one of your things you're passionate about. Why don't you go ahead and let us know what you had in mind on Monsanto?
Oh yeah, there was a big march over the weekend on the 23rd on Saturday, and it was the March Against Monsanto. It's turned into a annual march, and really it's people going out there and questioning the food supply and the state of affairs, the status quo when it comes to how our food is brought to us. And to me, it's a really important concept when it comes to the talking about anarchy and when it comes to like economics and stuff, because I think one of the big problems that we're facing in almost every aspect of society is over centralization, right? And I think most people that are in the anarchist school of thought will, say that decentralizing is key, and that's the way to help prevent corruption and prevent abuse, and ensure that there's decent practices going on, and making sure there aren't monopolies. So that's one of the issues with Monsanto and why people are so up in arms about them, is that they have a relative monopoly over a lot of aspects of the food supply. When we talk about the corn, 90% of the corn that's planted in the United States is Monsanto strain of corn, which is either Roundup Ready or BT corn. And the soybean crops, it's like 80% of the soybeans are Monsanto crops. And so what we're talking about here is one company that's got a history of doing extremely horrible things. Now, if you look back at Monsanto, I mean, one of the biggest things they've done was they helped create Agent Orange. And Agent Orange was used in Vietnam to defoliate the jungles and to kill off the crops for the communist rebels. And what happened is all of this Agent Orange use led to massive, massive poisoning of not only the land, but the people in Vietnam and of the Vietnam veterans. So we're talking about basically crimes against humanity here, where you got literally third and fourth generation people in Vietnam still being born with horrible, horrible genetic disorders. Like I wrote an article on it the other day. I couldn't even post the pictures because they were that bad. I had to put a link there and say, hey, if you want to see the pictures, click here at your own risk, because it's just not something you want to see. And then you got all these veterans, and once again, it's like with the military and stuff. We talked about this on the AntiMedia radio last night, since it was Memorial Day, about how the government loves to support the troops and stuff up until the point where they're done fighting. And then when they leave, it's like, okay, well, whatever. Now you got a bunch of these guys that came home from Vietnam, and they've got all these horrible disorders, cancer and diseases from being exposed to these chemicals that were in the most part made by Monsanto. And then their children are being born, and their kids have genetic defects. A lot of their kids don't even want to have kids because they don't even want to risk it. So this company Monsanto, they've got a virtual monopoly over some of the food supply, and they've got a history of doing really bad things. And so to me, it's like, okay, let's look further into them. And now I'm here in San Diego, California, and this is kind of relevant to me because Monsanto coincidentally also poisoned our bay with a chemical called PCBs, and it's an industrial chemical. They stopped using it in 1979. It was banned by the EPA. But it's a chemical that persists. It's kind of like how plastic doesn't really break down. Well, this chemical is even more resilient than plastic, and it's absorbed through the food supply, and it goes all the way up the food chain. So literally here in San Diego, you can't even go fishing in the bay and like catch a fish and eat it because it's poisoned with PCBs. And Monsanto had patented a product called acrylors, and it was a form of PCBs. And it basically has polluted almost the entire world's ecosystem. In many ways, it's a very small amount of pollution. But here in San Diego, we have a huge shipbuilding industry and stuff like that, and they use a lot of those chemicals. And it has literally poisoned our entire bay. And our city has now launched a lawsuit against Monsanto to try to recover some of the losses that we've incurred and to deal with trying to clean up the poisoning. And now the thing to me that's most relevant right now about Monsanto, because yeah, there's stuff they've done in the past, and it's been, they've committed these horrible crimes, and nobody's been held accountable. Maybe they've paid a couple fines and stuff, but no one's gone to prison or jail for it. I mean, no one's actually held accountable for this stuff. But the thing that's going on now with Monsanto is this whole controversy surrounding glyphosate, which is the herbicide it's the main ingredient in their best-selling product, which is Roundup. And now there was just a recent report from the World Health Organization that talked about Roundup, or talked about glyphosate, and it's starting to show more and more scientific signs that this stuff is causing cancer. They've already shown studies that it causes cancer in humans. There's already places like in Argentina where this glyphosate exposure where they're growing all these soybeans has really caused massive amounts of illnesses in these places, in these agricultural zones. And so the problem with Monsanto and their crops is they make these Roundup ready crops. So part of the crops that they make, these genetically modified crops, is they build these crops so that they can withstand more and more of this pesticide and more complex versions of it, which directly leads to them using more and more of the herbicide. So the more of these herbicide resistant crops are out there, the more that the farmers can spray the herbicide onto these crops. And the more and more of this herbicide is leaking into the groundwater and spreading out throughout these whole communities, and people that don't want anything to do with Roundup are, involuntarily being exposed to it and ingesting it, whether through their water or through their food. And to me, it's a big issue when it comes to consent. Now, if people consent to eating Roundup because it gives them cheap food, fine. But if people aren't voluntarily ingesting Roundup, there's a huge problem there. And when we start seeing all these health effects start piling up on it, that's when we start asking more and more questions. Now, Monsanto has continued to put out a PR blitz trying to say Roundup is perfectly healthy. They had a guy go on French TV a month and a half ago and said he would drink a whole glass of the Roundup. And the guy that was doing the interview actually called him on and offered him a glass of it, and the guy refused to drink it. But no, I think we're making progress, and it's all part of this bigger picture. So to me, the bigger picture here is that Monsanto is monopolizing on the food, but the biggest part of this is that it's starting to spur more and more decentralized food ideas. So to me, here in San Diego, one great sign I've seen since the March Against Monsanto started 3.5 years ago is that we've had an explosion in farmers markets. There's been before, 5 years ago, there was maybe 5 or 10 farmers markets in San Diego. Now there's like 30 to 40 farmers markets in San Diego. More and more people are supporting urban agriculture, localized agriculture, people that aren't abusing the people around them and the people that are eating their food by dumping a bunch of chemicals, whether on the food or into the environment. So I think that's a really positive sign, and we're starting to see people make better choices. One of the things that is really, kind of concerning to me, and you can probably attest to this, but there's a huge subsidization of the corn crops in the United States, and 90% of the corn that's grown here is GMO corn, and it's Monsanto corn. So basically it's Monsanto being directly subsidized by the government. And what they've done now is they've started replacing almost all the sugar in our food products with this high fructose corn syrup that comes from the GM corn, and that directly correlates with higher rates of diabetes that we've seen since the mid-90s up until now. The entire country has gotten 10% fatter. The rates of diabetes have gone through the roof since these products started coming out, since we started putting high fructose corn syrup in everything. And the government is definitely subsidizing this action. And so we're starting to see now with all this public pressure that's being built up, whether it's from the March Against Monsanto or people making better choices and voting with their dollars and stuff like that, we're starting to see companies start saying, okay, we're taking high fructose corn syrup out. Okay, we're taking out these nasty ingredients. Just today, we covered a story in the AntiMedia how, what is it, Domino's and Taco Bell? Pizza Hut and Taco Bell are removing all the artificial ingredients out of their food because there's been so much public pressure to try to get them to make healthier, provide people with healthier choices, and it's starting to work. And that's why I'm really excited now. Of course, the whole March Against Monsanto thing, there's a bunch of people out there with pseudoscience, and they're overblowing a lot of the fears. And people that are completely against GMO technology, I think, are fighting the wrong fight. I don't think that's the fight we want to fight. I think GMO technology can be used for good. It's just like any other technology; it can be used for good or bad. Unfortunately, in the current state of affairs, when it's being used in our food, in many ways it's being used in the wrong ways, and it's not being used to improve the world. It's being used to just extract more and more out of the people, and it's definitely hand in hand with the government. The other thing about Monsanto is that they've got what's called regulatory capture, where they've got their own bureaucrats that come from Monsanto, and now they work in the FDA, now they work in the USDA. Now they get special deals. They get Supreme Court justice that used to work for them, and then he rules on a case that involves them and doesn't recuse himself. I mean, so we're talking about like the epitome of corruption, the epitome of crony capitalism, and that's what Monsanto is, and that's why I'm so passionate about putting an end to them.
Yeah, the whole issue here is really a government problem, as always, almost always. If Monsanto was a truly private company in a free market, they'd make some crappy stuff, and it eventually get out through people like Nick and the media, the alternative media probably, and a lot of people just stop eating it. But as Nick pointed out, because they have the crony capitalism, so they get their Monsanto people into government, and they run the FDA, and they approve all the Monsanto stuff, and then at the same time they subsidize Monsanto, so this is government money or people's money through the government going to Monsanto to make them bigger. And then at the same time they have IP and patent laws, which are crazy, which say that if Monsanto plants a seed somewhere and it even goes onto some other farmer's field and they find it, they can shut down that farm because he stole their technology or their IP or their patent, which is crazy. So it's all government related, and that's why this show's called Anarchast, and that's why we just have to get people off of this ridiculous idea of government, because we just pointed out with Google, it's the exact same thing. It's if Google was a private company and all they were really doing was tracking all the stuff that you do on their site so they could offer you better ads that you were more interested in, that wouldn't be a major issue. And if you didn't like it, you would just use another website. But because they intermingle with the government, who has all the guns and they can do all these things, that's when the problem comes. So yeah, it's always fascism, and a lot of people who don't know these ideas will say the U.S. isn't fascist; it's a super fascist. It's also communist. The Federal Reserve, central bank, that's a tenet of communism. So the U.S. is a fascio-communist police state, and it's a police state as well because of all the police brutality videos that are constantly on your site. So it's getting crazy up there, and it's getting crazy all over the place, actually. But at the same time, alternative media is growing, and people are waking up. So this is the real battle. As you pointed out, technology can be used for bad or good, and if it's used for good, it can do amazing things, like you in San Diego talking to me in Acapulco, Mexico, in real live high definition quality video for free. That's the free market. That's technology. Then there's the government who's tracking it all and trying to kill us through Monsanto and other things. So yeah, it's pretty obvious which is good and which is bad. So would you like to wrap up with anything, Nick? And if not, let people know more about the AntiMedia.org, where they can go, where they can like, share, subscribe your content.
Yeah, man. One last thing on the food stuff. I think one great idea that's come about, and once again, it's technology being used in the right way, is this idea of aquaponics. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's basically where they grow crops in a contained system where the nutrients are provided by fish that live within the system, and the plants filter the water for the fish, and the water goes back to the fish. The only thing you really have to add to it is food for the fish, and it uses 90% less water, and we all know conserving resources is good, especially here in Southern California and the Southwest, where we have this massive drought. Conserving the water and being more efficient, more healthy, and then getting your food closer to you. Less of it goes bad, it has to be transported less time. You have more control over who's growing it. You know who's growing it. You know where it comes from. You know they're not putting nasty shit in it. So that's one thing I really wanted to make sure people start researching aquaponics and start implementing it. I had one at my mom's house. She was living down the street from me, and she had a house with a yard. Now, unfortunately, she's moved, and she doesn't have a yard anymore, but I had one there at her place, and man, we were producing all kinds of food and tilapia and catfish, and I mean, and it was all just really healthy food, and it tastes so much better too, and to me, and even just going for it for the taste is even better. So that's an idea I really want to put out there. As far as the AntiMedia, people can follow us on Facebook, the AntiMedia, facebook.com/the AntiMedia, the AntiMedia.org. We're slowly but surely starting to implement a video platform, and we're going to start putting out 1.5 to 2 minute videos that cover current news, and we're also going to be working on a little bit longer stories that are like mini documentaries. So that's one thing that we're really excited about. You can also catch us on ucy.tv, the AntiMedia Radio. You could just Google that. You can go to our website and find it from there. And then, of course, we're also on Instagram, the AntiMedia, and Twitter, the AntiMedia one.
That's great. And if you're watching on YouTube, we'll have all those links down below. And as we were talking about earlier, just support the alternative media like ourselves and AntiMedia and so many others. We Are Change, so many others, and many of them are all anarchists because that's really the what's rising right now is people are waking up. And as they wake up to knowledge, they realize that they shouldn't be owned by anyone, and then they become anarchists. And then things get really wonderful if we can ever get gets a lot of people to get into that. But support us all. Support Nick. I see this a lot. A lot of people just don't like videos. I'm sure a lot of them like it because we get a lot of video views. Just click little thumbs up there. Just right there, I think, if I reach into your living room or wherever you are right now, just click right there or share or subscribe to the channel. Just do little things like that. It can really help out and to spread this information. And as this information spreads, we can make a better world and get rid of all of this crony capitalism, fascism, communism, socialism, and collectivism, and have a great new world with fresh food that's not poisoned, all kinds of wonderful things. So it's definitely something to support. So that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
When you consider that you have to spend all your time basically unteaching what your kids just learned.
So not only must the government recognize natural rights, but the government can't disparage them. Unfortunately, the people in the government have a hole in their copy where the Second Amendment is, the Ninth Amendment, and the 10th Amendment.
So, this is not so saintly. I mean, because he's got the reputation of favoring, ending slavery. But he wasn't an opponent of slavery. The abolitionists were opponent of slavery, but not Abe Lincoln.
I mean, the actual argument and the explanation is pretty darn simple. I mean, it's so simple as to almost be self-evident. I mean, things like self-ownership and the non-aggression principle, it takes about 3 seconds to demonstrate that government can't be legitimate.
Well, I think human beings have the right to shape their own reality. And that's what's been taken away from us. We are participating involuntarily in a system that shapes our reality for us. And the first step is to not allow that.
You're paying off your debt, you have to pay off your car loans, your mortgage, you have to maybe even live with your parents, and then you look back at your life and you did nothing. You never challenged yourself, you never experienced anything, you never lived your life because you kept doing what the machine told you to do.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.